Hi, this is Dr. Cairns. I want to review this week's progress in organization behavior, what you've been studying, and what's ahead. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? We realize that this week we conclude Rango, and I'm glad that you've been enjoying it. There's been a lot of great learning as a result of that, so I'm really pleased with the progress that we're making there. So this is our roadmap. We have some quizzes taking place this week, chapters 6 through 11. You're going to be reading chapters 12 through 14, as well as submitting your classic theory paper, and be ready for your presentation next week. We continue also with your forum discussion of the conclusion of Rango and your faith integration application of the Christian atheist. All right, so we'll move on. Looking at how we're doing in the Christian atheist, I'm just really pleased with how God's really speaking to each one of you and your observations, how you're applying that to your life, but also looking at it as it relates to organization behavior. So we still continue daily to make mention of you in our prayers, that God would amaze you. We have a few weeks left, and I know He's already doing that in the hearts of many of you. So that's our continued desire. So this week in your readings of the Christian atheist, we came around the concept really of forgiveness, and one of really understanding God's unconditional love for us. And I liken this when I've mentioned this to several of you in the feedback, that are we capable of unconditional love? And if so, where do we start, and what does it look like, and does it travel into other areas of our life? And so for this, I look at Maslow's need hierarchy theory, and you can see how each one of those needs are satisfied according to his theory. And so if we look at that, we see esteem and status, and out of that we look at advancement, recognition, and status as a way for that to be accomplished. So what I'd like you to do is realize that our own positive self-image and self-respect comes from this standpoint. So some of you had mentioned, being able to love yourself before you can really love other individuals. So that's a desire for us to also be respected by others. So what I'd like you to take a little opportunity to take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and on the right hand side write your strengths, and on the left hand side write your weaknesses. And it may take a little while to list those. Strengths we might be able to rattle off. Our weaknesses, let's be honest, we all have them, so let's list them. So acknowledge our strengths and weaknesses is a step towards really setting realistic expectations, looking and setting aside the desire for perfection, because it's very difficult to accept individuals and offer forgiveness and unconditional love if we're expecting something more perfect of ourselves or of them. And we need to really accept our accomplishments, as well as be self-aware of our behavior and how it affects others and what our mistakes are. So we need to also stop comparing ourselves to others. And so that's our caution as it relates to advancing in recognition and status and achieving that positive self-image. So I want to take a couple of seconds just to really reflect a little bit on Rango, where you were asked to determine whether you thought he was a type A or type B personality. And so the definitions I've kind of chosen here is: the world won't spin without me pushing it. Well, that would be a type A personality. And if the world stops spinning, let me know, is a type B personality. And we can look at those elements and say, you know what, probably in this class I wouldn't be surprised to have a lot of type A personalities. However, we can't discount type B personalities and having one be more effective than the other, because both have their strengths and both have their weaknesses. So there's some things that we need to be aware of as it relates to how we react, but also how others affect us and their behaviors. So what personality type's the most effective? Well, it depends on the situation. And I'd ask you this question: which personality type is more prone to coronary disease? That's the one you want to avoid, and that would be the type A personality. So in chapter 7, you came across stressors in our life, and we all have from time to time things that set our hair on fire. And organization stressors, we have those listed there that appeared in figure 7-.2. and then also some individual consequences as a result of those stressors. And I tie this into figure 5.2, the job characteristics theory, where you can look at how do these stressors affect these areas in your life, and how could we manage those better. So we have some individual coping mechanisms that we find in figure 7.4, some strategies that we could take to help reduce stress. And I'm going to highlight one of the most individual coping mechanisms that are in the control of each one of us. Many things in our lives we feel we don't have as much control, and that happens to be a point of stress as well. But the one area where we do have a little bit more control is within time management. And I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, because you all are managing lots of things in your life, whether that be a job, whether it be your family, whether it be school. I definitely know you're managing the stressors of school that are related there. So how could we be more effective in our time management in all areas of our life? Because sometimes we create those stressors because of our inability, perhaps, to structure our lives and manage our time a little more effectively. So again, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's a key opportunity for us. Where do we spend our time? How do we spend our time? And really, what do we want to spend our time on? And then we can make those adjustments. So I'd like to take a look also as you're doing your reading in chapters 12 through 14. And you'll be looking at leadership. And this is a great opportunity for us to do a little self-examination, an opportunity to grow spiritually and have a life of character, of integrity and meaning. And so I draw out a particular passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 9 that's actually taken from a message that I heard from Erwin McManus at a conference I was attending. He took this portion, and it was actually a fascinating story for me. And the story is essentially about a city that was being besieged, and there was an individual there who was poor, but he was wise, and he was able to save that city by his wisdom. But nobody knew who that person was or remembered that person. And in many ways, that's one of the things that, as it relates to leadership. Most times we see that our leaders are very visible, but there's an element of leadership sometimes, that things that can be accomplished that we don't get credit for. And those are the times when God can really use us. And in today's day and age, there was an article written in Harvard Business Review where it was talking about managing the invisibles. And today, there are many individuals coming into the workplace, many millennials, quite frankly, who are individuals that don't necessarily want recognition. They want to be able to do jobs that have an impact and are meaningful, but they don't always necessarily have to step out into the limelight. And that can run counterintuitive to us, because we also think that people are really self-promoting today. So it's kind of interesting to come across this, but it's an element there. And so McManus would end this particular element of leadership saying, do you want to be famous or do you want to be great? And I've chosen a verse in Matthew where it says, do you want to stand out, then step down. Be a servant. If you puff yourself up, you'll get the wind knocked out of you. But if you're content to simply be yourself, your life will count for plenty. So it's one of the aspects as you're going through your reading in the leadership grid, think about this. And so I want to also say this will be the rubric that I'm going to use for feedback related to your classic organizational behavior paper. And so if you have any questions regarding this, please let me know. Also, for your presentation next week, this is optional. You could use this template. You could take the information that's represented in this template. This would be indicative of the type of information that I would like you to cover in your paper as well as in your presentation, but you don't have to necessarily follow this format. This format, this template is available in Sakai. And if you have trouble locating it, let me know. And lastly, I continue to daily make mention of you in my prayers, that God would amaze you, do something you need in your life personally, professionally, or spiritually. And I'm confident that that's being accomplished. And thank you to those of you who have been sharing and just we're praying for more. This week you conclude Rango in your forum discussion. Also, make sure you complete the quiz for chapters 6 through 11. Read chapters 12 through 14. That quiz will be due by no later than the end of week 4. Your classic theory papers due this week. Next week, your classic theory paper presentation that I just talked about, as well as Strength Finders assessment coming up in week 5. Many of you are starting to reach out to each other to see if you could partner on your organization diagnosis paper. Let me know once you do. If you've gotten a group together, let me know who is in your group. So remember, the virtual classroom never sleeps. If you have any questions or concerns regarding anything, please let me know. Thank you and have a blessed week.